how to correctly price dropshipping products in 2024 for your dropshipping store. This is one of the most important videos that you're going to watch on YouTube if you're thinking about getting into dropshipping, or you dropship and you have an existing store. Most people don't understand the actual numbers and rules behind pricing products for dropshipping and what it really means for long-term success. The worst thing that can happen to you is what happens to a lot of people is that you think that you're having success, but you're actually not, because you can never scale because you're not actually making profit, and you're taking profits, but you're going to lose in the long run because you don't have the working capital for your business to actually expand. This applies for whether or not you have a business or you don't, and you need to understand how to price a product to see if it even makes sense to sell. We're going to go through all of that in this video. Do not click away. I promise you're going to learn something here. Get a notebook, get a notepad, be ready to take notes. This is a no-frill video. If you want to see more like this, hit subscribe, but let's get straight into it and use our time wisely. All right, step number one. This is an easy one. What does the product cost? It sounds easy, but it's actually not easy. If you're interacting with Aliexpress, you actually need to reach out to the manufacturer and understand what their costs are. Often, what you'll find specifically for Aliexpress, if you're drop shipping off Aliexpress, is that you'll get like an intro offer. They're not really, their published prices aren't really for wholesalers, drop shippers, whatever it is. And as you do more volume, you get a discount, but you need to understand what they're actually going to charge you for recurring orders as you continue to place it, because it might actually be more expensive than advertised. Again, they're trying to make that single sale to somebody that's just a consumer buying the product. So you need to know what it's actually going to cost you after that first sale. So once you know that, you need to understand your shipping costs to your customer. So what you need to do here is you need to have them give you a quote for 3 or 4 different zip codes in different areas of the United States. I typically like to use Boston, a Florida address, a Los Angeles address, and then something in the Midwest like Texas. And I don't mean like, I don't want to play that game of like, is Texas the Midwest? I'm just thinking like, you know, geographically in the center of the country, but something also south, just so we can understand where things are geographically and understand our extremes. Once you've done that, I actually like just to say, I take the highest cost shipping, and that's now my average cost shipping. We're actually not going to add too much fat here. What I'll do on top of that, depending on when I'm getting the quote, is if I'm getting the quote any time that isn't around the Black Friday or Christmas holiday or 2 months from that, if I'm getting a quote from there, I add 10%. If I'm getting it basically, you know, September, October, November, December, January, February, that's the price that I go with. Any other months, I add 10% to that, the most expensive shipping cost, and that is now my averaged shipping cost plus my product cost that I'm taking into the next part of the calculation. Then you have packaging costs. You need to understand whether there is going to be any additional cost for custom packaging, or if you're going to be doing custom packaging. More often than not, you know, you're not going to end up doing custom packaging unless you're scaling really high and then you're bringing the product in-house anyways. So your packaging cost is probably 0, but you actually want to verify with your supplier just to make sure they're not going to charge you for any special packaging. You also want to check to make sure the packaging is adequate. So the next step in the calculation is adding adequate packaging costs. If you need to put additional packaging, you might be like, dude, what are you talking about? Why would I add packaging? Well, if you add a little bit of bubble wrap because you have a product that might break in shipping, it's going to greatly reduce the amount of money you lose during returns. And that is worth the few pennies, 10, 20, 30 cents up front, to just put a sleeve of bubble wrap at your factory before it ships out if it's needed. So those are the first 3. Now we get into the hard ones and the ones that people miss. First off is factoring in your running costs. So I've got some rules of thumb here. There are no firm rules of thumbs. What you can do is you can add all your running costs. This is like, you know, the cost to have your website, the cost to have your Shopify plan or whatever you use, the cost to have your LLC, the cost to run ads, the cost of hosting your email, all these things. You could do that, and then you could divide it up per week or something and do some type of calculation, whatever it is. I have found that no matter where you are, as you scale, there is a percent factor that basically makes sense for everyone. At the very beginning, it gives you a little extra fat. At the very beginning, if you're not making a lot of money, it adds a little extra fat that you might have at the end of this whole process to say, I'm just going to take it as profit. Where it helps you is that when you're scaling and you're at the end point where you're doing a lot of volume, it's a little thin. So my estimate here gets you through most of the struggles, but my philosophy is if you're doing a lot of business, it's easier to add a little extra into that product when you're doing a lot of business. So this is a good amount of fat up front. You're gonna cringe. I add 10% as running costs. So I take my number that we've calculated it at to this point, right? And then I multiply by 1.1. So then I've got a new number. I've got the product, the shipping, the packaging, and then after I've multiplied it or added 10% of the total cost, I've now got a running cost average in there as well. Now it may be higher for you depending on your business, so you need to understand there, but typically with a drop shipping business, like let's say your running costs are $2,000 a year, you probably need to still make $40,000 or $50,000 for it to make sense, and that's where the numbers kind of drive home. If you're not making, like let's say you have a running cost of $2,000 existing, if you're not making $40,000 from that $2,000 running cost, you either need to lower your running costs or your other costs have to go up and you need to factor it into that grouping, but that's typically my rule of thumb. Next is a pretty tough one, but it's something, again, people don't realize is your cost of returns. Returns are expensive. They cost more than the product themselves because typically with a return or if something goes wrong in shipping, you have to refund the full cost of the product and you lose the money from the transaction fee and you lose your time, which sometimes can also equate to money for dealing with the whole process of customer service and all those things. So returns is heavy. It's another 15%. Now, you might think that that's a lot, but 15% is actually fairly lean. 15% will maintain solvency if you don't have bad product quality. If you have bad product quality, you're in a whole nother level of hurt. But if you have good product quality, which I can tell you, I have good product quality because I keep all my products with me for the most part nowadays. I'm doing less drop shipping, but I'm still, I've had years and years of this experience. Adding 15%, it's pretty much what you need to do. So we're taking that number that we had after our first 4 editions and we're multiplying it by 1.15, and that's our new number of our cost per product. Just bear with me. And then we need to add our growing costs. These are the costs that come with scaling and becoming successful. Most of you are taught economies of scale. As you do more business, things get cheaper. But the reality is because you're not getting better margins on your product because you're drop shipping, the economies of scale hurt you. As you do more business, it costs more. Until you bring that product in-house and start doing your own manufacturing, growing costs more. You need to plan for this at the get-go because all of a sudden you're going to be underwater and your product won't be successful anymore. And you're going to realize that you can only make a couple grand a year from your product because you just can't scale with it. You need to add another 10% to your number to get to the point where you are scaling your business in the long run. So what you're left with is your product cost, your shipping cost, your packaging cost, your costs of your running costs, your costs of returns, and your scaling costs. So that's 6 items that you need to factor in and understand what your cost is on your product. So let's just say that all comes down to $20, which means your landed cost to your customer is $20. Now, this is where it doesn't work. Let's say that product doesn't get returned, you don't get that return piece back to you. That return piece is built in so that when you sell enough products, when you do have a return, it fixes your problem. You're not getting profit out of that. So the next thing you need to add is your profit margin, and that's going to determine where you can sell your product. Now, most people say, I want to make 40% profit margins. They add it, and then they are off to the race. They forget marketing. So the 2 pieces of your last cost is your marketing, how much it costs to acquire a customer, and your product cost. Now, marketing costs these days are very hard to predict. So what you're going to have to do is you're actually going to have to run some A/B tests and actually get some marketing out there. You might say to yourself, well, how then do I know if a product is successful? Because what if it eats all my profit margin? Well, the reality is you got to sell a product with a big profit margin. So if I were in your shoes, and what I typically do is I won't sell anything unless I have a 50% margin on it at the get-go, with the goal of still having a 35% margin. This is my minimum threshold, a goal of a 35% threshold, or 35% profit margin after marketing costs. So I'm going to start selling, I'm going to price my product basically 2x what my cost is, and then I'm going to run ads and understand my acquisition cost. If I can't make enough money, if I don't have a 35% margin, I add the additional acquisition costs, I up my product cost, and then I go for it. And I'm targeting a minimum profit of 35% every time I sell it after all costs, marketing included. Now, having been there, done that, I've been in the business for a long time of entrepreneurship, drop shipping, and all this stuff. I want a 3x minimum. I say that I want 50%, but the reality is I need 100% for it to even be worth my time at this point. So to give you guys perspective, let's say a product cost me $20 landed to my customer with all those built-in things, and let's say I have a marketing costs of $5 for acquisition. Let's just say that's, who knows if that's real, depends on the product, the market, whatever it is. So it cost me $25 to the customer. For my time at this scale of what I'm doing right now, I have to sell that product for $75 for it to be even worth my time. And the way that I find my winning products is I do all that math at the get-go. If I'm not making $75, I'm on to the next thing. And that's literally what I do all day, every day when I have time, because I continue to add products to my store. I reach out to different types of things, and I'm just constantly going through and iterating products to see, does this make sense? And to give you guys perspective, I have under my own brand, my own physical brand of products that I manufacture, I'm now up into like the 60s or 70s for my current venture, and I wholesale like something like 1,400, 1,500 products. And for each and every one of those, I've gone through this process and figured out, does it make sense? And that's how I've grown my business. And let me mention, if you do this all right and you find these winning products, you're also solving a problem for your customer and you're controlling the market because you understand the market, it lowers your ad costs. I, with my current business, have not spent a penny on advertising. Just to give you guys perspective of what what winning products can do, I've never paid to advertise. So let that sink in. I just gave you guys the complete playbook on how to price dropshipping products, and hopefully you guys use that, and I'll see you guys in the next video.